Hello all, this is Dr. Jyoti KB, Associate Professor, Government First Grade College Gubbi. Today's session, session 13, gives a brief introduction about the poetic form. Now, what is poetry? What are the characteristics of poems? What are the different types of poems? And what is the purpose of studying poetry? How is poetry different from poetic language and literal language, literary language? So what is the difference between literal language and poetic language? So all these questions will be answered in this session. So let us begin this session with the next slide. Now, through the session, we would like to make students able to understand individual poems in terms of a broader perspective of its poetic genre. Students understand the requirements of reading and writing poetry in this session. Students understand the purpose of poetry. They also understand the key elements of poetry and different types of poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is the collection of words which expresses emotions, ideas, thoughts, feelings. And poetry is used to share personal experiences and feelings. Now, they have what do the poems achieve at the end of their construction? They make language richer, effective, and they give quick meaning which is not possible by literal language. So literal language gives you only a literal sense, the surface meaning. But poetic language gives meanings which are far richer, effective, and interesting. And it is a type of writing that uses language to express imaginative and emotional qualities in addition to meaning. Poetry may be written as individual poems or included in other forms as in dramatic poetry. Now, what are the benefits of reading poetry? It supports the development of literacy, means your capability of reading, writing, listening, and speaking will improve by reading poems. It supports the development of writing paradigms and addresses needs to raise the standards for writing. Poetry is an excellent venue to teach and reinforce discrete grammar and vocabulary skills. Poems provide a focus for reading and writing and help students learn how to be concise. Poems supports components defined in brain research such as the importance of searching for patterns, and it is an acceptable way for students to express emotions and feelings. Now, what are the different types of poems? The first letter of each line spells out the topic of the poem. Such poems are called acrostic poems. A Japanese poem that consists of 3 lines and 17 syllables is called haiku. A 5-lined poem that conveys a certain mood or emotion is called sinequin. A 7-lined poem written in the shape of a diamond is called diamante. A 2-line poem that rhymes, each line has same number of syllables, is called couplets. And a poem which describes a topic using each of the 5 senses is called sets. So there are different ways of classifying poetry. This is one of its kind. So this is not the ultimate classification of poetry. There are different ways of classifying poems. Here is an example of a poem. I will play a guitar, I will become a star. See the rhyme, rhythm. So rhyme where the last syllables are sounding same, rhyme. Rhythm is the pronunciation units are all same in both the lines, that is rhythm. And the sounds used are also similar in first line and the second line. So this will come to alliteration. So poem has all these components. Now in this slide we are looking at how a poetic language, otherwise called figurative language, is different from literal language. So figure means drawing, image or picture. Figurative language creates figures in the mind of the reader or listener. We use figures of speech to add color and interest and to awaken the imagination of the readers. Figurative language is everywhere, from classical works like Shakespeare or to Bible. A figurative language is the opposite of literal language. Literal language means exactly what it says. Figurative language means something different too, far richer, far effective, and quicker in helping the students to understand. So this is the meaning of figurative language. Literal language and figurative language are opposite things. Literal language is used to say exactly what you mean. So what is at the surface meaning is the final meaning in literal language, while in figurative language there are different variations and varieties of meaning for the poems. The components of a poem, what are the elements of a poem? So what have you got to see in a poem? You see lines, you see stanzas, you can identify figurative language in a poem. There is rhyme, there is rhyme scheme. Alliteration means similar sounding words often repeated. There is consonant. Consonants is consonant sounds often repeated within the line in many number of words within the line. Assonance is repetition of vowel sounds in many words of the line. Onomatopoeia is the literal objects sounds are used to mean the object. So there are these are the different components of a poem. Now as I told you, the poetic language is also called as figurative language. So figurative language which expresses a meaning of an image, and figurative language gives more color, more richer meaning, and it is more effective than literal language. Now, there are different kinds of figurative language used in a poem. If you can identify some important figure of speech, for namely simile, metaphor, hyperbole, personification, onomatopoeia, alliteration, hyperbole, etc. Now, what is simile? A simile is comparing two objects with the help of as, like, or so. So she is like a rose. So they both have one quality. Rose is also beautiful. The girl is also beautiful. Now you are comparing the girl with the rose with the help of as, like, or so. She is like a rose. Now, if instead of using as, like, or so, if you say she is a rose, then you are comparing the girl with the rose without use of like, so, and as. So, this is the difference between simile and metaphor. So, simile compares two objects which have common characteristic with the help of like, as, and so, while metaphor uses or compares two objects with similar characteristic without use of as, like, and so. So metaphor is comparing two things without use of as, like, and so. Simile is comparing two things with the help of as, like, and so. Now this is the difference between simile and metaphor. Now hyperbole is you are exaggerating some quality of an object to a very highest point. For example, the blood flowed in the battlefield like the river. So blood flew in the battlefield. So blood flowed in the battlefield. So flowing is usually when there is more water, so which is abundant like water. So in the battlefield, blood was flowing like water. In the sense, you can understand how cruel the war was, how much of violent actions might have happened, how many people might have died, how many got wounded. So the whole picture of the violent fight is described in that exaggerated statement. So that is called hyperbole. Then if we talk about personification, you're attributing person the quality of a person to objects. The sun smiled at us means smiling is the quality of human beings. If you look at the objects or ideas in terms of persons, so if you attribute human qualities to objects, you call it personification. Now if you come to apostrophe is a figure of speech where you are talking to non-existent things or which do not exist in your context, in your surroundings, as if they are present. Now if you say life is very cruel, so life as such is not present as a physical object to be visible in front of you, but still you talk about life. So non-existent and non-present things are talked as if they are present, as if they are people. So this is one kind of figure of speech, that is apostrophe. So I talked to you about simile, metaphor, personification, apostrophe, hyperbole. So there are still a wide range of figure of speech as you refer to more books, and these figure of speech makes the images, makes the meanings, makes the feelings, emotions within the poem to be far more expressive, far more richer. In the form they come in the form of images. So these are the uses of reading poem. So I think this much should be enough for you to take your poetry classes seriously. And poems also help you to build your vocabulary. It helps you to construct new syntaxes, new sentence structures within your mind. So these things will help you to improve your language as well.